Welcome back, everybody, to the Ones Ready Team Room. You're here with Peaches and myself. Today, we've got Dr. Brittany Loney. She has an extensive career in exactly what you need to help you get selected from the number one question we always get, and it's mindset. So she has a Ph.D. in educational psychology and learning systems from Florida State. She's got an MA in kinesiology. She even was an NCAA Division I basketball player before her career inside of USASOC. Dr. Brittany Loney, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Excellent way to start the day with a chat with you all.
Absolutely. It's actually sunny here in the Pacific Northwest, which is really screwing up my lighting. So I'm sure I'll get some comments inside of the video. But ma'am, just give us a quick introduction of who you are and kind of how you got into the area that you find yourself now.
Yeah, so it wasn't a straight path. I doubt anyone's true journey in life has been a straight path. But I started out wanting to be a defense attorney, and that's what I went to undergrad for. That's why I have a criminal justice degree, because people will look at that and they're like, criminal justice, and then now you're cognitive performance. Well, when I was playing basketball my senior year, I got a major head injury that caused brain damage. And it wasn't my first. I had repetitive brain injuries. And with that one, I had a lot of difficulties cognitively and emotionally. I pretty much changed my personality. For anyone who's experienced a really serious head injury, you can understand that complete change in yourself. You become unrecognizable to yourself. So you pretty much lose your identity, not just for what you were doing and now you're banned from doing it anymore, but just the entire shift. I had a lot of emotional regulation issues. My knuckles prove it. I put my fists through many walls. So extremely difficult time. People normally don't talk about the emotional side of a traumatic brain injury because it's embarrassing. It can feel shameful, but it happens. I mean, when you damage your prefrontal cortex, it's where inhibition lies and impulse control. So I had a lot of difficulties, some memory difficulties, short-term type of stuff. But during that, I had an incredibly difficult time, and my coach sent me to a counselor to help me work through it. And I didn't want to go at first because back in, gosh, that was 2003. It's a lot more acceptable now, but then it was like 2003. And then also head injuries really weren't talked about then either, right? Now we have made the stigma far less and realize it is a physical type of thing. But then that was really not a thing at all. So when I went to this counselor, he told me about mental training, and I was very skeptical. I was an arrogant 21-year-old athlete who I was too good for that. And he convinced me to try it out. So I said, fine, what else am I doing with my time? And I loved it. I started training some of my teammates, the freshmen. The coach let me train them, which was really cool. And then I wanted to be a coach. So then I switched everything I wanted to do in life, got rid of the criminal justice. I graduated, but that was no longer my path. And then I went on to performance psychology, and I went to Fresno State 2005. And I was doing it all to actually train myself to be a better coach for basketball. I was going to start doing that. I was doing that on the side with a NAIA school. And what I realized is I really love the psychological aspect. And at first I wanted to help people through injury as well. And then it became so much more than that when I realized how effective the cognitive techniques were. And went on to grad school, more and more school. And then I went to a conference, and it was a sports psychology conference. And at that conference, they were recruiting people to work with the military. And my mind was blown. I was like, oh my goodness, I can do what I love with a population that I most respect. And it was like game over then. I applied for the job, left my Ph.D. early. My advisor was not happy. He's like, you're never going to finish. I didn't finish. It took like 10 years to finish.
But in your face, that advisor, you're like, I am going to finish.
All pride.
Yeah.
The only reason I finished is because I've got an ego, and
Perfect.
I didn't want to let that go.
Did you have any family members that were in the military before? You said you felt that connection or that pull towards the military. Like, where did that come from?
So my grandfather was, but no like incredible lineage that you tend to hear about. But in high school, I joined JROTC, and as a freshman, and was in JROTC for 4 years. and loved every single aspect of it. I felt like I could be myself there, even more so than in basketball. And after, actually during junior college, I went to junior college first because I was a very injured athlete during high school. And actually during that sophomore year, I tried to join every service. And they looked at my injury background, and I was denied by every single one. And then I didn't know that if you try one year, they say no, another year they might say yes because the parameters change. I thought it was just pretty rigid. Someone was like, oh, why didn't you try again after 9/11? And I was like, I didn't know that would be an option. I didn't know they changed the standards.
It might be different. It might be different in the same week with a different doctor sometimes, which is frustrating to us because we're like different doctors see it different ways or are able to diagnose you. So we definitely feel that pain. That's one of the reasons why we're here. When people hit us up, they're like, oh, I got this. No, I'm never in. We're like, well, everything's pretty waiverable. So
yeah, I wish I had someone who could have told me that. Because after I was denied by all of them that year, I kind of gave up on that as even a potential path. So I just kind of went on with my life. But I think it was meant to be, because I think I was meant to be now on the path that I am. Maybe I wasn't meant to be in uniform serving, but I think I was meant to serve those who serve. And that's where I figured out during that conference, it was just, there was no thought. Once they were there, they had that job. There was no deliberation. That's what I'm doing. So I left grad school 2010, went to Fort Bragg, started out there, had an incredible experience. It was with the Army's Center for Enhanced Performance, ACEP, one of the first cognitive performance training aspects. I know they've had little programs along the way, like the Jedi Warrior training and all of that back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But to be a part of the early days of ACEP was such a rewarding experience. And then to be at Fort Bragg, like the center and end of the universe all at once, was amazing as well. And I worked at USA JFK SWIC, the Special Operations Schoolhouse there for the Army. And then a year after, I went over to third group, and that's where I was the first performance psychologist or performance psychology professional. Cannot use the word psychologist, protected term.
Good. Great. You got us canceled. Of all the things for us to get canceled, Doc, and that was the one. Yeah, that's it. So you were
term.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, the verboten list of words, and we finally broached it. So you got to live in beautiful Fayetteville, North Carolina as well. So good on you. Hopefully you lived in Southern Pines like all the other grown-ups, but oh, how dare you? How dare you? Right. What was it like, kind of immersing yourself in that culture? Because you weren't really acclimatized to the military. You had that little background of JROTC and a couple things. But as you got there, what were some of those challenges of, getting into the teams, especially when you get over to the group, right? Like being at the schoolhouse is kind of different because it's almost more of an academic environment, right? It's kind of that weird line between academia and the military environment, and working at a schoolhouse is its own animal. But as you really started to immerse yourself into the special forces group and into the teams, like down in the granular level, what were some of those first challenges you faced?
Oh, the great question. So early on, I actually worked with the 82nd Airborne. And
all the way. Yeah. Them all-American boys.
And I was at JMP, or Jump Master School, was my primary requirement my first year on the job. And I couldn't ask for a better foundation to build off of than to be involved with Jump Master School. It was such a professional process. And then I got to learn so much. And I'd say the thing I had to overcome was myself and my own ego. And I just had to let that go. It really wasn't anyone along the way. Yes, there were skeptics. Yes, I got hard feedback. I got told many times that they should fill the potholes on Fort Bragg with my salary rather than giving me a salary.
Yo, welcome to the military. Take that, yeah. Doc. Tell me this, college girl. Can you beat me up?
So I had to just let all that go. And I think it was not leading with credentials. I just tried to earn credibility versus come in with it. And I asked a lot of questions. And during Jump Master School, you have a lot of first sergeants who are coming through there. So, and to have those type of mid-level leaders and high-level leaders kind of take me under their wing and just let me ask the questions and be naive and get my feet wet that way. I think that helped everything from that point forward. And then I also had a phenomenal site manager. She was former West Point, retired military, and she had a very much values-based approach and character. So I just worked on my character and didn't lead with, here, I'm this competent individual. No, I'm just going to show up and care about you as an individual. And then once you realize that, then we'll probably have a conversation.
You know, treat you like a person kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yep.
I mean,
I bet that really threw folks in the military off. You know what I mean? Like the second that you disarm them by treating them like a human, I bet they were like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
As a proud graduate of Army Static Line, I didn't get the good deal to go to the Air Force led Static Line Jump Master School. I can tell you exactly how stressful that thing is and how hard it was for me. Like I was a hair's breadth away from failing that thing. And I could have used some cognitive performance coaching during that school. So what kind of lessons did you learn, especially about stress tolerance inside of the Jump Master School? Like it had to be a weird thing to kind of like see for the first time. Cause Jared and I are both, free fall jump masters. So we've been through multiple different courses and training throughout our career. So we understand what that's like, but kind of as you first saw the military go through training jump masters, what was your first reaction to that?
I thought it was so well done. That was my first reaction. And what I noticed, and the first couple cycles, I didn't say anything. I didn't teach anything. I was there just all the time. Whenever they were training, I was there. And what I noticed right off was I could start predicting where certain students would end up messing up when they were doing their JMPI test by watching how they shadow boxed. That was the biggest thing. And what happened, what I would notice is during their shadow boxing, they would often do some shortcuts in it. And like when you get the back strap, I would see some of them just not do it all the way. And I'd be like, if you put a deficiency right there at the end of the back strap, that person probably not going to catch it.
Okay. And now I'm terrified because now not only could you see where the students were going to mess up, but I bet you could make them mess up by observing them and then putting a deficiency in there. For everybody that doesn't understand, so shadow boxing is something you do at JM school. You literally have either nobody in front of you, so there is like you're literally doing it in space, but you're doing your JMPI procedures. It's exact down to the inch to where you put your hands, to how you move your hands, to how you visualize certain pieces of equipment. Sometimes you have a dummy that actually wears a chute, but oftentimes, or a buddy that is, sometimes wearing a chute, sometimes not wearing a chute, but you do this 4 hours. I'm talking 12 hours a day. You were in your room at night, you were shadow boxing, doing the procedures. So that's what Doc is talking about there.
And the crazy part about it is that you, even though you look at it, you quote unquote look at the, to inspect where it's at. If you did not run your hand or your fingers over that exact section, you did not inspect it.
You did not inspect it. Right.
But, and it's a weird thing. You always wonder why they go, hey, you need to do is in a certain amount of time, instead of like, hey, let's go for quality versus quantity, in terms of quickness. But it's sometimes, and I don't know, hypothetically, if you were ever on the back of a plane and somebody had to de-rig and to get rigged back up, or there were some kind of issues, or you noticed even after a JMPI or a jump master inspection, you notice that there was a deficiency. You got to take that rig off, or you got to fix it, and then you got to redo a JMPI. Sometimes that is really quick before we're actually about to jump. So you've got to be able to do it correctly and quickly. So, but it's a stressful time for folks.
Yeah. And what I learned watching it what's the application of the cognition here is there were more shadow boxing reps than there were reps on equipment. So, and I was explaining to them how I was able to predict, okay, if this person's going to mess up, and it's not to say they will always mess up, but if they are, this will probably be where that point is. And some of the students would come up and talk to me on their own and be like, hey, what would you recommend for me? And I would just give them my observations. When you shadow box, you tend to do this. You're getting more reps. You're building the mental blueprint for that to happen when you get stressed out. So then that's how we started building the curriculum. And they used to always say eyes and hands. Well, we added eyes, mind, and hands, because sometimes their eyes and hands would be in the same spot, but their mind would be either forward or backwards. If they hadn't caught a deficiency yet, they're thinking, what did I miss? What did I miss? What did I miss?
Oh,
and then they're missing something because their eyes and hands are still moving.
You're raising my heart rate. Listen, I can't do this again. It was bad enough the first time. I want to give a shout out to, my instructors for getting me through it. But listen, I distinctly remember sending a text message to my ops soup at the time, Rosie Peaches. I sent a message to Rosie and I was like, hey, I'm gonna fail this course, dog. and it was for that. It's that downhill. Like, did I just miss a deficiency? And then you're not looking at what and then you forget where you're supposed to go next. And it's,
and everybody's done it. You're so right too, because you're going through and you've now moved on to the second person, because it's usually, there's three, and you've moved on to the second person. And since you're using that tactile touch, you're technically, kind of inspecting it, right? But you're still looking, and you're going like looking at that other guy, going like, okay, or so there's a couple things. It's that, and with static line jump master, and this, Doc, is you can't just say, hey, that's messed up. Like at jump master. At free fall jump master, you can kind of go, okay,
just gig. Hey, that's wrong. Yeah. Whatever that is, that's not right.
Yeah. Routed incorrectly or something like that. You don't have to know the name. Whereas static line jump master, you have to say the military term for that piece. And sometimes it is a ridiculous name. And I couldn't even tell you what some of them is, but it's, I'm telling you folks, it is a ridiculous name.
Yeah. Upward routed snap shackle incorrectly buttoned.
Yeah.
And if you don't say that, you're wrong.
And actually that's one of the things when we started working with them. Instead of them memorizing nomenclature, I just had them say it as fast as they could in the beginning, in the first few days, so that when they got on equipment, they've trained their lips to say these things really quickly. So we're all looking at, okay, how can we make the transfer more efficient? Don't just memorize nomenclature. Really speak it out loud, almost like you're learning a foreign language. You have to know how to pronounce this very quickly.
Yeah. And because if you don't say it correctly, it's wrong. If you mess up in terms of, if you say something is wrong when it's, the whole thing is wrong as an entity, but if you say something wrong and it's not the right deficiency, now it's like a double whammy, because you call it out incorrectly and you miss the actual deficiency. It's a wild time.
Yeah. Jump Master, I was so lucky to get that as my first requirement, because that helped me get credibility when I went on to SWIC, because it was a common ground we could speak to. And when I had conversations like this, they're like, oh yeah, I could see how that would have applied. And then now it's almost like they trust me a bit more to help them with something they're currently facing. So I couldn't have been luckier than to have that. And I also worked with the Bragg 10-miler team, the women's team. And that was just a group of people who I could be the dumb newbie to. I could ask them all the dumb questions, and they just kind of took me under their wing and taught me how to apply it. So yeah, those two experiences together, and having a phenomenal character-based site manager, set me up for success once I went the special operations route.
So one thing before I kind of transition to the next kind of topic, because I want to dig into your special forces immersion that you did, but the one thing that, and I can't exactly remember what you said, but talking about military training, that is the one thing that the military knows how to do and do very, very well, is how to train people. Because that is essentially, if we are not doing operations downrange or operations, I mean, even operations stateside are training events. Like we're going through weapon school integration phase right now, and it is a ton of pilots from different platforms, a ton of intel folks, cyber, space, Air Force special warfare folks that are all going together doing, operations in a training environment. And that is just training iteration after training iteration, scenario changes constantly. That is the one thing that the military does a good job at. Can we always improve? Absolutely. But like, we train very well. I mean, that's from basic training on to, old folks like me.
Just blunt force rep. Yeah. Just blunt force repetition. Fun fact, I'm actually older than Peaches. We make fun of him for being old all the time. I'm actually older than him. It's almost a thing, to Peach's point, like it's a thing that we've conditioned people so well. Like when you get into that military training, it's from both sides. The military training instructors are excellent at giving training and having actual educational input and output and having a formalized training plan. But the people that are, you become a professional student as well. I can feel when a training event starts, I know exactly. I'm like, he's the instructor. He's going to give me the intro. They're going to do this. She's going to guide me through this next part of this process. This is what they're expecting from me. I know how they're going to ask a question. I know how to answer the question. It's a thing that we've all been extremely well conditioned to. I wonder how close is that to the academic training that you had? Like, were you able to just be like, oh, I know what training is, and I know like this cohort of people understand the information I'm about to give to them? Did you have any challenges like communicating in that educational sense?
Not necessarily on the communication side. I think it's on the approach angle. Mm-hmm. What I saw a lot of peers do is come into a situation and then almost highlight everything that is not the way they think it should be. And I think that's an awful approach. I think coming into the situation and looking, okay, what is being done right? Because there's a ton. You're right, Peaches. Like the training the military does is impeccable. Yeah. Are there little refinements that can happen here and there? Yes. Everything will always have that no matter what. But really seeing what are they doing right and how can I also learn from this situation as well. And I almost started viewing myself more as a crowdsourced best practices because I got to talk to a lot of cadre members across various training. And it's, hey, this thing worked over here. Have you all thought about doing that? And it was almost like a distiller of these best practices and lessons learned that were across the community with people who didn't necessarily always talk. And then on the language thing, there was, some aspects of this doesn't directly transfer. I think anytime you try to speak overly academic in a training setting or in a military setting, you're going to miss a lot of people. Some people will love it, but I think it does miss a lot of people. You have to talk practically, and not simply in a way that's negative, but simply in a way that is applicable and relevant.
Oh, I need it simply. I'm a moron. I'm a straight up. I have a high school like GED. That is it. That is as high as I go. So I appreciate the plain language.
Yeah, and speaking your all's language too. Like if I hear you all say a word and that means this and this like scientific concept, I'm going to use your word, not my word.
Well, that's good because I have a difficult time pronouncing words. So
and it's mostly cursing. This is as long as I've gone without saying the F word in about 10 years. So that's it.
Yeah, that is one thing I picked up.
Yeah.
That probably endears you to a lot of folks. A comprehensive use of the F word in nuances and different meanings and tones. That'll really get you some credit.
Yeah. Making a shift from doing like soft week and like different types of panel from teaching a group of people on the ground. I'm like, do not curse.
Yeah. And you apparently I transmit it on my face very, very well when I'm about to say it because Aaron and Trent will call me out. I'll get people going like, dude, you almost did it.
You almost did it, man. You almost did. You could see just the beginning of the oh.
Yeah, but you can use it as a comma. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. So you went and started working with USASOC and you did kind of a big special forces immersion, which I imagine coming from, the 82nd Airborne and those guys are absolute meat eaters as well. But there is a different kind of mentality, and I'll, please tell me if I'm wrong here. This has just been my experience is that, the 82nd Airborne and 101st and regular Army or whatever is very regimented in the way that they are, you're doing this because I told you to do it. That's the way it's done. And that's the way it's always been done. And you will do it this way. You will not deviate. In the SOF arena, not just, ODAs and stuff like that, but kind of, all of SOF, it is highly encouraged to, and I hate to use the word think outside the box, but you need to be creative and a creative problem solver. And you need to not think one way. You need to be able to accept one, recognize different data, be able to accept that, input that, internalize it, and then make an educated guess. And it's not, doesn't necessarily have to be 100% solution. You can operate on the 80%, but you just got to make a decision and go with it. Did you kind of experience the same kind of things when you stepped into that world?
Yes, completely. And the way I tend to think is more on the creative adaptive way. So sometimes for me, it was a bit hard with 82nd and the regimented style of thinking. I understand why it is that way. It makes sense for the mission. But when I went over to the SOF environment, I almost felt more at home mentally. But I still battled some aspects. We did things called mental fitness courses. Someone I work with, CC Clark, kind of started those up. It's the integration of the physical and the mental within an obstacle course style event. And the mental ones we used to set up to where creative thinking was required to accomplish it in the most efficient manner. And sometimes you would get teams just fighting over, that's not having integrity. And it's like, well, that's creative. There were no rules that prohibited them. I could understand if there were rules that prohibited them, that's integrity. But it was interesting to watch the battle over integrity and creativity unfold. And some people thinking we were training people to not have integrity. And I understood where they were coming from, but it was also helping them see the self-imposed constraints that they put upon themselves. And if someone doesn't put those same constraints upon themselves and then solves it in a different way, it doesn't mean they didn't have integrity because they didn't abide by your internal rules. Those rules were not explicitly stated. They weren't rules.
What a funny thing too, because like in any military plan, like these folks, these men and women are professionals and they know what constraints and restraints are. They know what like they know the rules of the game, and for them to run up against that brick wall of being, like, hey, I'm supposed to be innovating here and I'm creative and in this free fire environment, I came up with this solution, and to have somebody else come and go, absolutely not, you're lacking integrity in that. That is a wild thing to have in your head at the same time. Like that's so challenging.
Yeah. And one of the obstacles, to give you an idea of like where this came out and what type of obstacle, it was transport 400 pounds down and back on a length of turf. And that was it. That was the instructions. And it was on a sled. So what we really wanted to see is people to put on the weights and then use them as wheels and turn it over. And then they just walk it down. It's super easy.
Sure.
Instead, we saw many people just put 400 pounds and trying to push 400 pounds on a turf that's not, that has a lot of friction. I mean, they waste a lot of energy. And then when they look and see the other team rolling it like wheels, I don't know if it was that they were battling integrity or if they were just mad they didn't think
they were just mad. Yeah, they were mad that they lost. That's that ego talking.
Yeah.
But we get the same thing like whenever we do monster matches. So it's the same kind of thing. It's a physical and mental kind of obstacle course that we put on ourselves. And we have to create rules through there just to go, okay, you cannot use a motorized vehicle. I heard 400-pound sled. And I was like, go get a truck right now. Somebody go get your car. That's exactly what I went to. And the thing, so we create these rules, but we can only if Aaron and I or the three of us are going to develop a thing, we go, okay, so for this event, we want, these are the rules, but it does not matter how many of these I've done. Someone will always think of a new way to
get around what I've told you to do.
And I'm just sitting here going like, and you get the other teams that are like, oh, what the hell? You're like, man, I didn't brief that he couldn't use it, but I didn't even think to do that.
I can't tell you how many times that happened of what did you think of this one?
These a-holes ruining your training event by not listening and finding, and you can't even be mad. Like students do it to us all the time. I've done it. Absolutely. You're like, you know what? I would have never thought to finish this problem this way. You didn't even you succeeded in completely ruining my training event, but you know what? Fine. I'll give it to you.
Yep. Lesson learned for me.
Right. I guess we all learned today.
It is funny how you kind of, for the folks that didn't, maybe it's not didn't think about it, but get upset about it is, or at least followed those, instead of they just piled the 400 pounds on the sled and pushed it. they almost index themselves. They put their own constraints on because they're like, okay, well, I think the intent that Doc's putting on us is to do this. And no, actually you're wanting to say, I remember a scenario that was given to me at selection was to, I won't say the scenario, but it was basically, hey, the world's your oyster, in terms of how you want the amount of airplanes and stuff like that, and the type of airplanes that you want to solve this problem. And I constrained myself because I was like, well, in reality, I wouldn't have this because, they don't have these things in these type of planes in Europe. So I constrained myself, and they never said that. They just said, how would you solve this problem? And I failed that event because it was just like, why didn't you ask for this? Or why didn't you use this? I'm like, well, they're not in that AO. And they're like, who cares? What?
Yeah, I assumed X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. It's a bad thing.
Yeah, and I say that, like, if you want to enhance creativity amongst a group, it's highlight what are the self-imposed constraints that people have in their mind and get those out on a board first. Like, all right, what are we assuming? And let's just make sure that those assumptions are actually correct so we can work around them versus just working with them sitting in our head and not really explicitly putting it out there. Yeah.
So we kind of got off on a tangent here. I wanted to continue on the kind of soft immersion that you did with USASOC. So you noticed that in terms of doing obstacle courses and that kind of creative thinking. What were some of the other kind of findings that you recognized?
That it mattered more how much I cared and who I was than what I had to say. And a chaplain took me aside probably my first week on the job at third group and told me they will not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really internalized that to the rest of my career. That was a foundational principle I operated off of. So that was for self and how to practice. But then on who they were as people and how they function, they had this relentless desire to get better.
Oh, yeah.
The highest performers within self always wanted to get better. And they were willing to be open, to be vulnerable. And I think there's this perception that military service members of any type, they never let their guard down, whatever it might be. They're rigid, they're closed. And I saw none of that. I saw openness. I saw a willingness to be vulnerable. The things that people have told me behind closed doors, I can't believe that they told me that they entrusted me that much. So the character element, I think, was not a surprise because that would be like that. I didn't expect them to have high character, but it was more of the society's conception of who they should be and just how different it really is when you're in there with them and have their trust. Maybe they are to outsiders who haven't earned that trust, but once you earn the trust, it's just incredible to be around people of such high character.
It's amazing that you say the perception, because I think, and this is just my opinion, but I've said it before, I think Hollywood has hurt the perception of the veteran in the way that, like, through everything that, me, Aaron, Trent, Rob Gutierrez, all these, folks that have been downrange and done great things, not me, but great things, that we're supposed to be broken. We're supposed to come back and be some broken mentally, broken physically, which the physical part, yeah, sure. And we probably are broken mentally too. But what I mean is, like, somebody who's not able to function in normal society just ends up, almost every movie you watch, you're like, or show is just like, okay, this broken person that just can't handle reality, can't handle a normal conversation, which is, sure, there are a few that are probably like that, but the majority are just fine.
Yeah. And to your point, Doc, it's, it has to be one of those things, like, you have this perception of, military folks are standoffish and they're not open to input and they're very rigid. And really, we're like cats. Like, once you gain our love and our acceptance, like, you can't, like, we're in every room with you suddenly. And you're like, wow, I can't believe you shared that with me. And, you know, it's not that you didn't see that character coming, but it's like you had this perception of what the environment would be like. And all of a sudden you're kind of let into the trust tree. And then, you know, it's almost like, okay, whoa, stop sharing. Okay. I didn't know you were going to say that. Let's back it up there, Turbo. let's take a breath.
The
yeah,
other
it's like I had a ton of big brothers. That's really what it felt like. Just a ton of big brothers. And I think another thing that I wasn't expecting, but I didn't really have any expectation around this, is the degree of humility and really what that means. And it was epitomized by many of the people I've worked with of really what is a quiet professional? What does that look like? And to be around that day in and day out, that just makes you better as a human being. And the level of well-roundedness of these people not only want to serve the country, but it's family. It's always other people. And I don't think I was ready for that level. I don't think I gave it as much thought, but that was another thing that really resonated with me. That was a bit of a, not a surprise, but a uniqueness.
Well, you know, what's funny is that we've been told that with the podcast that we're not quiet professionals now. Like, we have, like you guys are, I can't believe you guys would start a podcast and talk about stuff and do that kind of stuff. You know, you're breaking the quiet professional thing. Like, okay, so maybe there's some truth to that, but like, I'm not on here talking about, you know, I've been there, no shit, there I was, right? Like, it's just, it's a weird thing.
I like it. You're an angry Peaches today. Yeah, I like it, man. You're just staying up late, and then you wake you up early, and man, I'm here for it. Look at me being the positive one. This is really going to throw people off.
Yeah, I know, Doc. If you were tracking, we're in the middle of web school integration, and I'm going on like very little sleep. I wasn't even sure if I'd make this.
Chief Peaches, when he showed up, I was like, "What you doing, buddy? You should be taking a nap right now." He's like, "No, man, I'm in it." I'm like, "Man, he's crusty. Be crusty today. I like it."
But part of that quiet professional thing, a leader that probably one of my favorite leaders that I've been able to work with, he had this thing about there's the quiet professional and then the silent professional. And at what point does the quiet professional become a double-edged sword and limit the use of your full capability? And so I really liked that distinction is, yes, the quiet professional, the humble being, but sometimes silence can be a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah, very, very much so. And that's, you know, that's the kind of way we look at it, is like, hey, we've been quiet for so long that we have hurt our own recruiting, our own retention. So maybe it's time that we, you know, change that. Again, it's not coming on here and talking about like, hey, let me tell you about this one-time operation. Let me tell you how badass no, it's not, nothing like that. But you also mentioned one more thing when you started integrating with the SF dudes that I think translates among all of the soft community and probably others too. But one of the number one things we care about too is kind of folks' integrity and their character. Because if I cannot trust you, like don't even show up. I'd rather you just not be there, and I'll just do all the work myself. That's fine. Is the importance of that trust, because as soon as it's broken, being able to get it back is very, very difficult. I don't know if you notice that in that community.
I did, and they always would say, "Can I trust you with my life and my wife?"
My life. I was saying to say the same thing. My life, my wife, and my car. You know what I mean? That's the easy three right there. Can I trust a teammate with my life, my wife, and my car? And if that answer is yes, then you're doing better than 90% of the rest of humanity. So, and
I think that's another kind of a recruiting aspect, because my life would have been different if I didn't work with the military population, and my character would not be where it is now. And I still have ways to go, but the focus on character, you just don't get that anywhere else. And if you're looking to be a good human being by the end of your life and kind of feed your soul, whatever it is for you, I mean, there's no place like the military to build your character and to be the person you would want to be.
Right. As you evolved in this life of yours and as in your career, you started to see that there was an ability for you to help, right? And that's kind of where Echo came from and where Core One came from. So as you started to evolve in really getting into elite cognition and human optimization, which is what Echo stands for, you saw a way that you could help folks like this out, those high character individuals that want to push themselves and want to perform the absolute best that they possibly can. And you have a lot of really interesting concepts. Just to open the conversation, your idea of, 09 to 1300 is your prime time, and we don't schedule staff meetings from 09 to 1300. Absolutely love it. I don't know how every staff meeting I've ever been to starts at 9 or 10 o'clock. It screws up whatever flow I've got going on from post workout. It really gets in the way of things it takes another hour for me to get back into it. But there's a whole host of things that you have that are essentially cheat codes for helping people prepare cognitively and then in the moment. So I kind of want to start talking about that. But how did you make the transition from, all right, I'm with the teams on the Special Forces group at USASOC, but now I'm going to go on this completely different journey that they're parallel, they're related, but I'm not on the teams anymore. Now I'm helping them get the tools that they need to be successful.
I needed to figure out how to add value in a very meaningful way and sometimes a very quick way, or else, it's abandoned strategy quickly if it doesn't work right away. So I think it was in that development of, okay, I want to really help these people, and how do I do it in the best way? And I like psychophysiology, like the physiological aspect, I think makes everything that we do in cognitive performance more concrete and kind of attracts the warfighter more in that element. Sorry, I forgot where I was going with that.
It's okay.
Oh man, it happens to me all the time.
The question was convoluted. I just wanted to know, so you saw an ability to add value, and specifically in the cognitive realm. So I want to know what the impetus was, or what you saw in these entire people. And you have a wide swath. You had a very large breadth of folks that you were looking at, from the 82nd Airborne, just airborne infantry folks, through SOF, through some of your other experiences with the women 10 mile. Like, you have a lot of people and a lot of diverse personality groups there. But the one thing that you saw in everybody was like, hey, cognitively, I can give you these tools to be better. And I just want to know kind of how that happened, and then how Echo and Core One sort of evolved out of that need to be valuable.
Good. Thank you for rephrasing that. That was extremely helpful. I saw a gap, and there was a lot of focus on physical fitness, which does affect the brain in a very positive manner. But there was a gap around cognition, sleep, and some other things. And when I was at third group, I noticed they wanted a lot of stuff on memory and observation skills. And originally that really wasn't part of our repertoire as performance psychology professionals. And I had to sit back and ask myself, if not us, then who? There was not another entity that was available to take that on. The ops psychs are busy doing ops psych type of work, and they have a knowledge base in it, but there was so much missing that the warfighter would come to us with. And honestly, originally it was like, oh crap, I have to figure out how to help you. And I had to learn a lot with groups who were asking me for memory stuff. It's like, okay, I'm going to go get smart on memory. And then a month later, someone was like, do you know anything about sleep? And I was like, I know some stuff, but oh gosh, I got to go get smart on sleep. And that's how the model of Echo was built. Does it have to do with the brain? Does it have to do with performance? And is it relevant for the service member? And if it met those three things, then it should be in our capability if it's not already. So it was a lot of building, a lot of learning. And that's where the model of Echo came from. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there's 5 pillars to the Echo model. Number 1 is brain armor. And those are the lifestyle habits, sleep, nutrition, and there's tactical dietitians that help with that. How movement affects the brain, chronic stress, connection with other people. So that's brain armor. Those are the fundamentals. Then we move up a level to elite me. This is the traditional performance psychology that you'll see across Olympians, across the military. It's how do we make someone the best version of themselves? That's pretty much elite me, aligned with values, purpose, energy, that type of stuff. And then 10X training, because we were embedded in a lot of schoolhouses, we had to learn the best training methodologies, not just for the student, but then also how do we take what we know and expand it to help cadre, to help role players as well, because role players serve such a role in the word.
Right. Pun intended. Right. Great job there. Good. We're a big fan of puns on this podcast.
And helping the student be in their stretch zone. Sometimes role players make it too easy. Sometimes they make it too hard. How do you teach a role player to teach and role and be the best role player? So that's 10X training. And then at the next level, we have operational cognition. I call this the hard skills of ECHO. This is observation, memory, decision-making, critical thinking, creative thinking, all the things someone used to come to us for and say, I want this to be better, because they saw the direct applicability to their job. And that's really where we built the most education and training. And that opened the door to other conversations. And then the last one is raise the tide. That's team dynamics, leadership, and culture. So that's how our model built, and it built from needing to fulfill 3 tenets. There was a gap, and we're the best suited to fill it.
So with all that behind you, but like I connect to all that stuff, like everything that you're saying right there, like rise the tide, raise the floor of your organization through culture and through relationship building and stuff. Like the fact that that is a pillar of something that you're focusing on is insane. Everybody, you know, I don't want to say everybody because I don't want to discount, you know, what you're saying, but sleep. Yep. Got it. I know how important sleep is. I know how important physical health and my nutrition is. Like that's your physiological baseline for all things, right? Like we have, you know, had the distinct benefit of learning all of these things throughout our career. I want to focus specifically on that last pillar though, on that culture aspect. How important is it? It's obviously important enough for you to involve it as one of the 5 pillars, but that spiritual interpersonal relationship, that raising the culture of an organization, how is it that you coach people through that, or what tools do you give people for that team building? Because for our folks that are going into any selection, right? Rangers, special forces, even into the regular military, that team aspect, I mean, I don't know, every single PME I've ever been to, that's like the first block that you get is you're going to storm, and then you're norming, and then you're performing, and you're going to have these, but like we focus on it a lot. So what tools do you give to people to recognize what a good culture is, what a bad culture is? How do you get them to that high performing team?
So helping them with organizational awareness. Where are you now as an organization, and being honest about that, the strengths and the areas to improve. And we usually do start with the strengths, because usually if I go in and it's like, here's the area to improve. Okay, turn off. There are a lot of strengths. We almost want to use the strengths to build up the areas to improve in a culture. So helping them do an assessment of really where's the culture, and then what are the values truly that you want to instill in this culture. Now there's the Army values, the Air Force values, like there are those already created values, but then even within that, you can obviously embrace those, but then define what you want for your culture. And sometimes it's with different words. There's an exercise we do. It's called the Great Teams exercise. And we get the entire organization in a room. And sometimes if it's huge, we have to break them up into subgroups. And we just get a long list of values that are important to each team member. And then we work through a scale back process. And by the end, you come up with 5 values that the entire group has agreed on. It can be painful. I've been involved in many of those. But when the whole organization and every member signs off and says, yes, I commit to those values, then you have something that happened organically. And then from that, we define, well, what actions really are defining of these values for you all? Because I could say I value hard work and I have a little bit different of a definition than what you have. And that's fine, but we need to all be on the same page. So we would define it by actions, and then they would all sign the creed. And then we would have routine follow-ups based on that. And then we'd also educate on, if you want sustainable high performance, here's the cultural norms that are undermining it. When you as a leader are sleeping in your office every night, I understand why you're doing that. I understand your drive and your purpose, but your entire organization can't sustain that. So it's also working with the leader to identify, here's the actions that you're doing and here's what's being reinforced. Are you okay with that? Because if they are, it's their decision on how they want their culture to be, not my decision. But it's pointing out things that could potentially undermine something that they're working towards.
Yeah, and that sort of shared understanding can be built at all levels. Like this doesn't have to be something that's already in an established culture. Like for the folks that ask us, hey, how do I establish this team? You know, I'm going to be thrown into a big bay. I'm going to have a minimum amount of time before something very stressful. For us, it's assessment selection. I'm going to have a minimum amount of time to establish these things, and getting to that shared understanding is extremely important right away. And it doesn't take a lot. It could be a conversation. It could be just like what you said, getting down to 3 or 5 things that you know kid can connect with and that the team has buy-in. And then you know that you're all going towards the same thing, whether it's goal accomplishment, whether it's, you know, we're going to make it through today without getting extra push-ups because we aren't listening, or everybody's going to have the right gear. Like it can be super simple. What are some other sort of cheat codes that you've seen for people to prepare, you know, before the moment, right? It's like, so building that mental armor. I love how you build that brain armor. That's amazing, from sleep, but not only that, but, you know, mental preparation. What are some things, pieces of advice that you'd give to candidates that are getting ready to go into any selection or into the service or into the first responder realm? What advice would you give them? Like, hey, start doing these things now to prepare yourself for that upcoming challenge.
There's a few books I would definitely recommend on this list. And starting with the Raise the Tide and the team player aspect, the book Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about humility, drive, and interpersonal skills as the qualities of the ideal team player. I would read that and reflect on where do you stand in those 3 aspects. It's an extremely valuable book. And I think with someone preparing for selection, it's not just about you. Obviously, you're trying to make it through, but it's how you interact with others during most stressful, kind of worn down times. So Ideal Team Player and internalizing that. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
Great
He's
book.
a Stoic author,
Yep.
Phenomenal book. And I think that helps someone preparing for selection and getting outside themselves. And it's not just about you in that moment. It's how are you affecting your team in that moment? And can you suspend your ego to more positively affect the mission? And along that, the Daily Stoic is also by Ryan Holiday. I would recommend that as a daily practice to start internalizing some of the Stoic principles. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Stoicism. But I do think that is the recipe in many ways for resilience. I think Stoicism is an ancient practice that needs to be more pervasive in modern society, just for resilience in general, on how you think about the world. So the Daily Stoic. And then the other one is Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. Not just start with why. That's the book that explains why it's so important. But Find Your Why is like the workbook where it will help the candidate or person who's getting ready to be a candidate identify their own purpose, values, how they want to be in the world, not just what they want to do. And then also truly define what they want to do to express their values and purpose. So Find Your Why for me is, if you want to help with motivation and you want to show up to selection as your best self, complete the entire Find Your Why workbook, and you'll gain so much clarity for life as well. And in that, with the purpose piece, I always recommend people do the 5 whys. And this would be something like if I were to ask you, Aaron or Peaches, why do you want to become a AFSOC operator? And then you would just tell me, okay, what could be one reason, if you don't mind playing along with me right now?
Absolutely. No, I want to, I want to be there for somebody on their absolute worst day. It's why I want to become a pararescueman. I wanted to be there when the call goes up and an American service member needed help. I wanted to be the person to answer that call.
Well, you had that pretty well defined.
I've read the books, ma'am.
With a refined why right now. So that's definitely not surface layer. But my next question would then be, well, why is that so important to you to show up for someone on their worst day? Why does that resonate so much for you?
Yeah, because I want to be of service. It's a part of my, I like to think that I be of service and of value to other people. And that's the most clean and righteous kind of expression of that need for me to be of service is to sacrifice myself that others may live in order to make sure that they are okay.
And then my next question, like what I'm doing here, and I'm not going to make you go through all 5 to 7 whys, but I would then ask you why being of service to others is so important. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to get to the deepest layer to where there's no more why to ask, because that is so central to who you are as a human being. And what you've chosen is to express your why of serving others. You want to express it by being a pararescue. Like, that was your expression. That's your what. But your why is really being of service to others. So if you were going into selection, I would start to use that rooted why of service to others of, okay, when you're going through really hard moments during selection, how are you going to be of service to others? And start allowing that purpose to drive your action during selection.
So I have a question on that then. When you have done that exercise with folks like us, how many of them go down to essentially servitude or service?
Just about everybody.
That's what I was thinking.
I was going to say, that's a pretty common one. Yeah.
What I would encourage someone who's getting prepared, like you all are very refined in knowing your why, but someone preparing for it, I think, needs to go through the process of figuring out where that servitude came from. Because I think that will be the ultimate driver and the motivator to stay in the fight when maybe they want to raise their hand and say, I'm done. Or they end up wanting to act as their worst self, which is very selfish in that situation, and not serve others because they're tired or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, servitude, I mean, it's pretty much at the root of every service member I've done that with.
No, that's what I was thinking. And it's just because as you're walking through it with Aaron, I'm sitting here going like, well, because I've done these exercises before, and then everybody in the room that would do this is all like, well, actually, that's kind of servitude is really what it's go down to. And I think we need more of that. I think we have, I'm just going to get into something completely different. And I'm not trying to take us there. But I'll just make the comment though. I think we have, recently we've heard like, hey, take care of yourself. Like, you first. Is it possible, hypothetically, that maybe in order to take care of yourself, you need to take care of someone else? And I don't mean like in a, hey, I'm taking care of somebody, helping with the groceries. What I'm talking about is like no shit servitude of helping somebody else. Because if you do, say you go and you help the homeless or you help somebody in a nursing home or something like that, like it will help your soul. It will help you out. So, and now everybody's getting helped. I don't know. I'm not trying to go hippie on us, but it's just, I think we've gotten too far into the like, hey, I need to do self-care. I need to take care of me first. Swap that around, start serving other people. And I think you'll find that you are healing yourself as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because honestly, when people tell me self-care, or you're obsessed, you're doing too much, and it doesn't resonate with me. And I found it doesn't resonate with the community. You can't make someone value something that is not a value. I mean, you can't force it upon someone. So when I've worked with people and trying to improve their sleep or other things that might seem self-care-esque, it's connecting it to how does it help you show up for others? And if it is something like sleep, if you don't sleep, what jeopardy and risk do you potentially put your teammate in when you show up in a high risk training environment and you could have slept? I mean, I know situations you just can't sleep. So I try to relate it to servitude and how it affects others around them, their own potential view of self-care. But yeah, I've definitely gone away from the self-care sort of verbiage, because that's not going to resonate with those whose number one mission is to serve others at the expense of themselves. If you're willing to sacrifice your life, you're willing to sacrifice your health.
Well, and it's such a hard thing. Like, people have a hard time having this competing interest in their brain at the same time. We're calling it self-care. I always refer to it as my social battery, right? Like I am an extroverted introvert by nature. People, like, I'm affable, like I'm okay at parties, like people talk to me. That drains my batteries. Like when I get done with social situations, I feel like I'm drained. I do not feel that way when I feel like I am of service. Self-care for me actually is being of service, and that fills my cup up. That fills my battery up. So when you tell people, hey, self-care, focusing internally on yourself sometimes is important. You need a break. I need my alone time. Okay. But self-care for me can also be in my community, talking to a young man at the gym. It can be talking to somebody that I'm mentoring or having a phone call with a friend that is like, hey, I need this piece of advice, or I'm having this issue. That is self-care for me. And it's hard for people to understand the duality of that thing, right? Like if being of service, and that I do connect with that, and being, having servitude, that actually does help me though. That is self-care for me. But the self-care advocate would tell me, well, no, you're doing too much. You're giving too much energy outward, and they can't have that idea in their head at the same time. It's a little bit frustrating because I definitely see it, both ways, and it simultaneously. It's like Schrodinger's superposition in my head for self-care.
No, I couldn't agree more. That other care is self-care. I mean, we actually kind of know that in terms of how the brain works and how we're built as human beings. We are tribal beings. And part of brain armor is connection. That's one of our pillars of brain armor, is not just sleep, nutrition, all this other stuff. Connection is a huge part of that. Is what are you doing for others, and how are you connecting at a level of the soul and not just surface level connections with others? So I'm glad you brought that up, Peaches, because it does frustrate me in the self-care world. Is it does feel selfish, and those who want to serve others, that's not going to resonate with them at all. So it's, how do you take care of yourself so you can serve others for as long as possible? Yep.
Nope. It's something that I've been, I've heard people talk about. I've thought about it a lot myself. It's just, it's a frustration that I have with, I guess, the current society right now. But anyway, switching topics here, as we start to wrap up here, where you guys are doing training programs, where can folks find you and sign up for these training programs?
So from the government side, I work with Core One, and it's the Elite Cognition and Human Optimization program. I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest method to reach out to me on, is LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can go to the Core One website, and then there's like a contact us type of thing if you wanted to contact that way. I'm also in the process of developing my own LLC. The website will be elitecognition.com with a hyphen in between elite and cognition. So those would be the best methods right now to contact me on. Awesome. If you don't mind, can I take 2 minutes just to give a couple more pieces of, I want to serve.
Go for it.
Send it. That's why we asked you on, man. Yeah, get it, Doc.
So I'm sorry to kind of hijack this, but I'm like, this is good stuff. I want to get this out to them. So for the preparation on selection, also keep a selection prep journal to kind of work through some of these reflections on your values, on your purpose, and then looking at everyday situations as training. Mm-hmm. So when someone really makes you mad, when you're driving, or your spouse just pisses you off, and sorry, I just need to use that word. That's a training situation right there. Your reaction to all these situations is going to define what your reaction will be during selection when you are worn out and kind of at your worst. So look at those as rewiring your ineffective reactions to become more value-based and how you would want to show up in those situations. And then when you are there, it's taking on an optimalist mindset, not a perfectionist mindset, where you're not going to be perfect. Nope. And the soft environment will never find perfect people, because perfect people don't exist. So I would say, look at it as growth. And every time you make a mistake, other people are as well. It's, how can I learn and grow? How can I show up better tomorrow? How can I show up better in the event that's later today? Always keeping this growth mindset of, okay, how does this impact me and how can I get better? And just try to be optimal versus perfect. And then when you find yourself focusing on the outcome of, am I going to get selected? How did I do? Return to the process. What do I need to do right now in this absolute moment to show up as my best self? Because that's the only moment that you can control. The outcome will take care of itself. Just show up aligned with your values. And then also think about your personal SOPs. So your personal routines. So pre-performance in the morning, before any event, how are you realigning with your values? How are you realigning with this optimalist mindset and this growth orientation? Develop a micro reset after mistakes that you can do. It takes about 30 seconds. Could be some breath work. could be returning to your purpose and your values, but some sort of thing that helps you micro reset in a moment where you're finding your reaction is not the most suitable reaction. And then lastly, a shutdown routine. Each evening, you're going to be tired. You're going to be worn out. That's the point. But how can you shut down so that you can get the most recovery in the limited time that you have to recover, and not fighting reality when it's, oh, well, I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm not doing this. It's like, the reality is you signed up for this, and stop fighting it. Like, just simply accept that this is the reality. And how can you not expend more energy fighting reality? Cause I see a lot of people do that, a lot of wasted energy of complaining in their head, gossiping, whatever it is. You need to really optimize every ounce of energy that is available to you. And all of those are energy wasters. So that's kind of what I have there. And if you need positive reinforcement and you're still in selection, there's your positive reinforcement.
Nice. If you need empathy, get a dog. I love it.
Well, I do want to say thanks for coming on. And first, I guess, shout out to Devin Costal for linking us up. So appreciate you out there, sir. Well, sir, yeah. I mean, you're retired now, so how about Devin? There you go. So yeah, thanks for hooking us up, and we really appreciate your time coming on here, and thanks for what you've done for just the military in general, because you've got time on the conventional side, you got time in SOF, and you're still finding ways to serve through elite cognition and everything like that. So thanks for coming on and chatting with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It really is an honor to be able to speak with your audience and to connect with you both.
Yeah, oh, Doc, thanks. Can't say thanks enough. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom on this one.
Yep. All right, we're out here, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Enjoy the rest of your day, and make sure you get a training session in. Later.
Bye.